Okay, so we're just going to go over two or three practices, which are all getting mixed up, all muddled up. And I saw like at least 20 or 30 websites that had them muddled up. And the only thing they have in common is that they involve some kind of forceful breathing and something with the diaphragm. But other than that, they are completely different. And I should have tissues for this. Um, yeah, I'm going to pause to record. First of all, let's learn what breath of fire actually is. So, breath of fire, which also is now being called fire breath, but it's called breath of fire. Um, this is a practice, a specific practice from Kundalini Yoga. And how I know this practice is because Sadananda studied with Yogi Bhajan back in 1970 before he met before Sadananda met Trungpa Rinpoche and got into like deep meditation and everything. So that's how Sadananda learned Kundalini Yoga, and he kept a very few of those practices. One is actually doing dynamic Paschimottanasana for constipation. But he kept a few of those practices, and the main one was breath of fire. And when did we use breath of fire? We love icy cold baths. We love cold baths. Long before Wim Hof, we have always jumped in icy cold lakes, streams, and glacier lakes and whatever. So what do you do when you come out? You don't dry yourself. You air dry and you do breath of fire. You do it as much as you can. I'm like super unfit right now because of my fracture, but you do a lot of breath of fire, a lot of rounds of breath of fire. When you're doing breath of fire, you don't worry about thinking about your diaphragm, but you're just thinking about this kind of almost panting, breathing. If you look when you do it, you'll see, because your diaphragm is part of breathing, it is involved, but it's not the focus. It's a rapid, forceful breathing. They use it in Kundalini Yoga as a pranayama to raise up the Kundalini. We use it way before Wim Hof came along to get warmed up after ice baths, icy cold baths, which has been a part of our practice since forever. So that is what breath of fire is. That has been getting muddled up with a completely different practice, which is super important to us as Ayurvedic practitioners, which is Kapalabhati. Kapala means skull, bhati means shining. So it's a practice of pushing the air up so it clears the sinuses, it clears the head, it clears the foggy feeling. It's not really for heating you up, but it's really for shining the skull, clearing the head. This practice is not deemed a pranayama. This is not part of pranayama. This practice is part of Shat Karma or Shat Kriya Karma, the 6 cleansing practices. Next year in satsang, when we look at in satsang, we're going to go through all of the steps of yama and niyama. And when we go through Sauchna, we're going to go back to the 80s and all the experiences of first putting Ayurveda and yoga together here and learn more about all of those practices. So we'll delve into that more later. But for now, that's what Kapalabhati is. It's part of Shat Karma. It's also in the tradition of Baba Haridas. It's part of the 4 purifications. So it's actually something you're supposed to do every day as part of 4 purifications. So part of the problem is with my fracture that my tummy has gotten even worse. So I don't know if you can possibly see my diaphragm, but you have to begin this practice very gently if you're not used to it. There is a case study in Chest Journal where a woman ruptured a lung, got what's called a spontaneous pneumothorax from doing this practice forcefully. Sadananda and I also personally met a man in India who made himself deaf by doing pranayama wrong or forcefully. So when you're first starting to learn Kapalabhati, you just go, yeah, you have to come where you can possibly see
Is it okay if I move it like to the right, or is it gonna no.
Okay.
Okay, I'll just sit here.
You just go. So it's a forceful with the diaphragm for the out breath. Totally relax for the in breath. When you first learn it, this is the pace. So when you're beginner level, it's just that pace. Only the force is only with expelling the out breath with the diaphragm and thinking that it comes up and hits your skull. The in breath, totally relaxed, happens naturally. Remember, you don't want to force anything. You want to build up to it because you don't want to have an incident like the 2 incidents I told you about. As you get more used to it, it can go faster. But the point is you're pushing from the diaphragm, feeling the breath, so to say, hitting the skull. It clears the whole head. That's why you need the tissues. Totally relaxed on the out breath. This is not deemed pranayama, it's a kriya, it's for clearing your head. Third one, people are also mixing up. So we'll just touch on it. Bhastrika, this is an advanced pranayama. So if you're new to all this stuff, just you never begin pranayama with Bhastrika because you don't want to blow out your ears or rupture your lungs or do anything bad for yourself. None of you may remember, but when I was a little girl, in my small town in Melton Mowbray, there was an actual blacksmith with an actual smithy because we had many horses. We had the army remount and we had 4 fox hunts that met. We had many horses that needed shoes, so we had a blacksmith. And the blacksmiths, I would go in the forge and watch the blacksmith. You could go in and watch. And he had leather bellows. So the bellows, how he kept his fire going. So the mate was using the bellows to keep the fire going and he was forging the horseshoes. So with Bhastrika, how it is an actual pranayama, not a kriya, and it involves forceful in-breath and forceful out-breath. You're supposed to do it maybe 20 times, then take a break, but build up to it. Only do it if you're used to pranayama. It's at least at an intermediate pranayama, intermediate then advanced. So that you can see the 3 are completely different. Even though it seems like the entire yoga internet has them muddled up, there are a few people that have put something out that's explaining the difference, and they are now you understand they're completely different.
Significant part of what's happening in the body.
But Bhastrika really is for raising Kundalini.
And period. Doing it, Bhastrika in-
So when you're doing the Bhastrika and you're doing it properly, you're holding Mula Bandha, you're holding Jalandhar Bandha. I didn't do that part. And Uddiyana Bandha is being moved around, right? So you're actually doing three bandhas, but one of them's dynamic. So holding Mula Bandha, holding Jalandhar Bandha at the chin, and then so Pranapan Samayukta, you are pushing apana upwards. You are pushing prana downwards. They are joining at the seat of samana vayu. It is creating a spark. The spark is igniting the Kundalini Shakti. That only is really why you do it. It's also very healthy because it's building core strength. So the theory is that by holding the Mula Bandha at the anus, pulling up here, by holding the Jalandhar Bandha to force, so you're forcing the apana, the downward moving wind, to move upwards. You're forcing the prana, it likes to move down and in. You're pushing it down and in. They're meeting here where the Uddiyana Bandha is happening dynamically for this practice. This is the element for this samana vayu is fire. So when you push these vayus together, the idea is there's a spark. There's a heat, a fire that builds up, and the Kundalini Shakti is like, oh, I like this. I should get awake. That's the idea. Right. It's to help you have an awakening when you're that's really what all of pranayama is fundamentally about, is for awakening, but it's also like a lovely practice for your core strength. But be very gentle and careful. You have to work up to it.
How do you know? Honestly, after our client yesterday, I was thinking about, I feel like all these practices can be done, taken wrong and done in a way that it could really mess you up.
Yes, so it's very important to understand that pranayama can be done in a way that's wrong and can really mess you up, which was what Sarah was just asking. And so pranayama should be done under the guidance of a teacher, and it should be done in the levels, beginning, intermediate, advanced, because the people that have done things like blow their ears out or blow their lung out must have they they were using their ego to push themselves. They were not following properly under the guidance of a teacher. So pranayama should be studied by a teacher. I was just showing you what Bhastrika is, but if you haven't learned pranayama with a teacher, don't bother about it because it's a powerful practice. If you've learned pranayama with a teacher, all I was trying to do right now is make sure we know that these three different practices are completely different practices done in completely different ways for totally different purposes and what they are. So I'm actually going to stop the recording now. Bye, everyone.